This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, Naomi Tom. Good evening, everybody. My name is Naomi Tom. I'm the Curator of Education for Himdaki. Thank you all for joining us this evening for our fourth and final lecture for our summer lecture series. This evening, we have Dr. Jacelle Ramon-Sauberan joining us, presenting on her dissertation work, Caretakers of the Land, History of Land and Water in San Xavier. Um, Before I go ahead and let her in and get started, I just want to let you all know how we have this set up for this evening. So I do have everyone's cameras and mics disabled so that way there's no interruption in our guest presentation. Please feel free to utilize the chat. If you have any questions, comments throughout the presentation, please put them in the chat. When we get towards the end, we'll go ahead and go over those with our presenter. And also, if you want, let us know where you're joining us from. We have people joining us from far and wide from the from the Tohono O'odham Nation. I'm joining you all this evening from Coolidge, Arizona, and I know uh, Giselle said she has her class attending us this evening as well. So welcome to your class. Let's see. A couple other things I want to let you all know. So we are recording this event for this evening, and we will have uploaded to our YouTube page. It'll probably be uploaded sometime tomorrow, and you'll be able to view it then, or please share the link with anybody who may have missed it this evening. And we know the times aren't always convenient for everybody. So we have people joining us from Tucson and Yuma. Welcome. Alrighty, so let's Giselle, let's go ahead and bring you up. Um, and before we get started, I just again want to congratulate you on your recent graduation this past May. Huge accomplishment. I was completely cheering for you from a distance. Congratulations.
Thank you. All right, it's really great to be here with you all. So skakurinik, aniap jugi, Jacelle Ramon-Sauberan chapwak, amachit, uh, Nyanja Wood, Janice Ramon, Kachap Walk, Amachid, Nyaago Wood, Clark Sabron, Kachap, Buffalo, New York, Amachid, um, Nyahuud, Owood, Lena Rios Ramon, but Kachap Walk, Amachid, Nyabap, Owood, Husi Ramon, but Kacha Sidanage, Amachid, Nyakak, Kacha Nyawask, Owood, Patricia Davoli, Charles Sabran Butt. So, good evening, everybody. My name is Jacelle Ramon-Sauberan, and I come from the Santa Cruz community on the Tohono O'odham Nation. And I did my introduction to let you all know who my family is. My mom is Janice Ramon from Santa Cruz. My dad, he's originally from Buffalo, New York, but has been residing in Tucson for over 30 years. And then with my maternal grandparents, they come from Santa Cruz and also Sitanage within the Shuktuak district. And then my other grandparents, one is no longer with us, and then my grandmother, she lives in Alabama. So I'm always excited to talk about my dissertation research. So when I got asked by him the key to come and present and be part of this lecture series, I was really excited. And so without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen with you all. And then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Okay, so let's see here. They'll be able to share my screen. There we go. Oh, Naomi, I might need your help here
Okay, let's see. Hold on.
because it's saying that I gave permission in my system preferences, but it's still not letting me.
Mhm.
Any idea what needs to happen? Sorry, everybody, technical difficulties. Just bear with us for a second here.
Okay, technical difficulties happen. So let me try to make you a presenter and see if that changes it.
Okay.
Okay, try now.
It still won't let me.
Oh no.
Oh, no. I have a really awesome PowerPoint to share with you all here.
Mm, Okay, the only other option, if you're willing, if you want to email it to me really quick and I can go back and forth for you.
Okay.
Do you want to try that?
Yeah, because otherwise it's
Okay.
telling me to leave and then I have to like relaunch go to.
Oh, okay. We've had this happen before.
Yeah. Because it says that I have access to it, but then it's like you have to leave and relaunch everything for it to go through.
Either way is up to you. If you want to log out and log back in and then try it again, or you can email it to me and I can just control it for you. Just tell me to when to switch it.
Okay, let's see. Okay, let me try this.
Okay, you're an organizer
Sorry,
again.
it kicked me out. Okay, now let's see if this will pop up on here. Okay, I think I got it.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, yeah, here it goes. Perfect. Okay, everybody see my screen okay?
We can see it.
All right, cool. All right. So, again, always happy to share and talk about my dissertation research. And, before I get into talking about some of the topics that I wrote about and highlighting different parts of the history, I just wanted to share some background of how I came to writing about this topic. And I also, too, if you are interested in an electronic version of my entire dissertation paper, I'm happy to email that to you all. Again, I had been working with the Santa Cruz Latte Association during my master's program at the University of Arizona, and then I just went straight for my master's into my PhD. And I'd always help out at the Latte Association whenever I could. And so when I started my PhD, um, you know, I was looking for a topic, something that would be helpful for my community and for others. And so I had done this three-part multimedia project for the Latte Association to highlight their 25th anniversary. And so I did three interviews, one with an elder, Mike Enos, Senior Butt, and then my auntie Julie Ramon Pearson, and then San Xavier District Chairman Austin Nunez. And there's only so much you can capture within, a video. And so I did this series, and they showcased, the different parts of it for the Lattes when they have their meetings. But then also too, after I had assisted and helped with the first video we did with Mike Enos Senior, he passed away. And so one of the things that had been brought up to me, and I even noticed, was that um, you know our knowledge in different ways wasn't being passed on, for various reasons, such as somebody passing away suddenly, or maybe somebody felt like they didn't know who they could pass the knowledge on to, just to name a couple different things. And then I think also too, um, just wanting to create something that was going to be useful. I didn't want to write something and then it just be put on the shelf to collect dust. I wanted to have something that could be used in classrooms, that folks could reference from time to time, and so that's how I came up with writing this project. I look at a project, paper, research, and I had also talked with others because at them we are an oral society, and I think we have reached a point um, where it is time to write down some of our knowledge. And I also believe that there is parts of our culture and our traditions, overall our himatag, that shouldn't be written down. But when it came to capturing this history in my community, everybody was okay with me writing it down and finding, a way to preserve it. I still did incorporate an oral part to it, and folks that I did interview, I did audio recording, and I'm still working on that component of my research project, and I'm hoping that those files can live in various areas. For one, the Santa Cruz Latte Association, here at the Allotment Community College, in the library, even at the Himatha Key. I wanted this to be accessible to people. So, along with my paper as well. So, again, that's something that I am working on. And this truly was a community based research project. My community was part of it from the very beginning. And I've said this and I will continue to say this, that we put this together, because if it wasn't for my community, my district, and supporters, this wouldn't be what it is. To it wouldn't have come to life in a way to describe it. And so, it was really their help, because a lot of what I'm talking about and writing about was before I was born, or maybe I was, maybe just a baby. So, again, being able to talk to these individuals and hearing stories from people that were that lived it and were there and helped, and you know um just wanting to share and making sure that, again, this can be a resource for folks. And so within my paper, there is literature, there's parts I pulled from newspapers, excerpts from books and whatnot, but then the voices of my community are interwoven within each of these chapters. And my auntie Julie Ramon Pearson is a big part of that. I sat down with her. I recorded her 3 times, but I sat down with her numerous times to talk about this. And so this is a list of what each chapter is about. And, I just got done talking to my class and sharing with them of how much the Atam Himathug, and our history and our culture is intertwined and interwoven. And so through my research, I really saw that, and how, you'd go from one topic and how it related to another and another and another, and, how numerous things were happening at the same time, but it was all to be able to protect and continued to do what we've been put here to do by Creator Iitoi, which is to take care of the land and be, and that, like the title of my presentation, be caretakers. And so I wrote about history of Santa Xavier, the how we went through allotment, and then the co-op farm and how that became to be in Santa Xavier, and something I'm always really proud to talk about. Um, and then also too, defenders of O'odham land rights. This activist group, it was really something for its time, and amazing to see different family members of mine that were part of it. And then also writing about the Southern Arizona Water Rights Settlement Act, also known as SWRSA, and then the creation of the Santa Cruz Latte Association. So just to give you a little bit of information. And so diving into this and talking more so and highlighting, like I said, some of what I wrote about. And for me, it was a learning process throughout everything, and it's just soaking in all of the knowledge. And so once I did all my interviews, it was just like, wow, and then there was the next stage, which was to write it all out. And and it took a lot of thinking and figuring out how I was going to put this together and have it so everybody could understand, the importance of all of, the historical events that took place. And so, we're talking about place, we're talking about Santa Xavier. And so, it's interesting our history in Santa Xavier and how a lot of people came to Santa Xavier to work in the farms. And, my family, I come from the Rios family on my hu'ur, my maternal grandmother's side, and we're one of the original families from Santa Xavier. And so I come from a long line of farmers, and I actually have some of my family members that are, or they're no longer with us, so they were original allottees, landowners. And so it was really cool to learn my family history throughout this as well. And so when we're talking about O'odham, a lot, again, it has to do with place, and how you lived is really had to do with what was around you. And so for us in Santa Xavier, in my opinion, we are Ahmed O'odham, and we're also Tohono O'odham. So we're river and also desert people because we have the Santa Cruz River, and that was a water source that we utilized. And I heard stories growing up from my grandma that would talk about how my great grandparents would utilize the canal system of our ancestors, the Huhukam, and have water be diverted from the Santa Cruz River into um, our farm area and where we lived, and I have pictures of that too. And it was really something to hear that. And that farmhouse that I'm talking about, the foundation of it's still there out in the farm fields, just would be northeast of the Santa Cruz co-op where the headquarters is, their admin building. And so whereas other areas, you had those that were semi-nomadic, so they had two homes, or those that were roamers that traveled a vast amount of land, and they did hunting and gathering. And so again, it all had to do with where you lived. And that's even also something amazing driving, say, from Tucson to Flagstaff, and how quickly your surroundings change, and you're in desert to forest, right? So even looking at our ancestral land as O'odham, and looking at how that changes based on where you're at. And so I wanted to share that, and again put us in a place, and because I'll be talking specifically about Santa Vir tonight. And so, throughout my research, I collected some really awesome old historical photos of Santa Vir and also surrounding areas. And so, this is what the Santa Cruz River looked like at one point in time. and how it flowed. And I feel like at times there's misconceptions that it was this big raging roaring river because of pictures that are shared, but most of the time when it was a big raging river was when it was monsoons, or there was heavy rain that happened in Nogales. And so again, this is really cool because of how this picture is situated and how you can see the farm fields. You don't see much of city buildings, concrete, any of that, but this is what it used to look like at one point in time. And so this is a house that I was talking about, and these are my great grandparents, Frank and Selma Rios. And that little girl there is my grandma and some of her brothers. And so my great grandfather, Frank, he has shown up in different history books, and I always heard stories about him. And it wasn't until I believe it was my master's. I was working on a project, and there was a Arizona Historical Society book that I picked up, and his picture was in there. And so, and having these to look at and putting a face, to a name of especially a relative was really important to me, because that's, I think, something um within doing dissertation research is, for me, it's a personal connection too. And I always point that out and saying, this is part of who I am, and that makes it that much more important and meaningful to me. And it's really funny too when we found these photos of my grandma, um, and you can see she has like squash, or hard at the bottom of her feet. And so growing up, whenever I went to her house, she'd always have a big old hard sitting next to her. And so to see this picture of her when she was a little girl, and I want to say like this photo is probably maybe like late 1920s ish. She was born 1923. And so but yeah, so I when we saw that picture, just made me instantly think of that. And so but again, yeah, this house is no longer standing, but the foundation of it is out in the farm fields. And I go out there from time to time. I was out there recently with my partner and our daughter to take a look at it. And and you can see too just how different it looked over there in Santa Cruz once upon a time. And you can see how high the crop is growing in the one picture. And he's talking to um, other O'odham and non-O'odham to share, because they wanted to know how he was so successful at um, you know, uh, putting everything that he did together. And his whole being a farmer is what I'm getting at. And from planting and harvesting to then selling it and sharing it. And they were just like, what's your secret? So and then these are other photos too of what the Santa Cruz looked like. And it's kind of hard for dates, because a lot of the photos that I got from Arizona Historical Society, they had the date, or the year at least, when the photos were donated, but they didn't have the date of when the picture was taken. But I had stories shared with me from my grandma and a few others, where this is what a typical day looked like down at the Santa Cruz River. And Autumn in would go there and carry water back to their houses. They would wash clothes, and my grandma would say, yeah, when I was a little girl, we'd just go play. And she said, and it looked nothing like it does today. And she passed away in 2011. But the she said that it was just always so shady and lush at one point in time. And there was cottonwood trees and willows and mesquite. And she said it's complete opposite of what you see today. And so and so you can see that in one photo, the tree line, right, along the Santa Cruz. And so talking about our ancestral land and looking at how big that was. And for O'odham, we lived in family clusters, clans at one point in time along rivers. We had Santa Cruz River, Gila River, Salt River, and also we would go to the ocean. And so we knew where all these different water sources were, and we were able to um, continue on as what our creator had told us, where you only take what you need. And so for us in Santa Xavier, we were able to utilize the Santa Cruz River and continue to use it for generations upon generations. But then you have those that start moving into the area. Tucson started to was created, Old Pueblo, then started to expand, and you have individuals that don't have that same mindset as you. And next thing you know, the Santa Cruz River is completely depleted. And our water source that we've used for as long as we can remember to farm, you know, and also, use it as drinking water in various ways, cooking water at one point in time long ago, was gone. And our livelihood was gone. And we started to notice the depletion of the Santa Cruz River around 1900. And then by 1920, you started to really see the decrease of water flow. And then by about 1940 or so, that's when it was completely dry. And on top of it, there around 1920s, there were different wells that were drilled to get down to water sources as well. And but those, again, they were utilized to the point where it was just rock at the bottom of those wells. And so we had different aquifers within the Santa Cruz River Basin, and those were bone dry. And so that really upturned, our way of life, because yes, we still had auction farming and that traditional way, but we were able to have this water source, and it was gone like a snap of a finger. And so, that was really problematic, because then, what do we do? And especially being a farming community. And then you also have to think about that, not only that part of, the livelihood, but also to the knowledge. So you can't farm, and then you don't have a way to be able to, share and pass on the knowledge. And I talk about that within my paper as traditional ecological knowledge, or short TEK. And so that's talking about our relationship to land, to the plants, to everything that surrounds us. And so that hurt us. And I'm in this picture here, you know, um, we today in Santa Fe are known as one community, one district, but long ago we had several different communities in the area. But I like to show this because then you can see all the where it has, or the oitak, the fields. So you had these little communities, but throughout there's all these different fields too that were around. And again, that's what we did. We farmed, and when we harvested, we would share our crops. We made sure that our neighbor, our relatives, everybody had enough food to eat. And that was our way of life, right? And so again, this is always a fun map to show, and to I like the names. um, and so we had to survive, right? And so, looking at 1940s, 1950s, also too realizing that we as Optum had to adapt to the changing lifestyle around us. and that trading, which we had done, and um, my great great grandmother that you saw in one of the first pictures, her, my great great grandfather, they would actually go by horse and wagon to downtown Tucson, which at that time just seemed really far, unlike today. And they would sell whatever they had from their little ranch in Santa Xavier, and and that's how they got by. But then, again, you get to this point where you that's not really the way people are going about their lives. It's more so now money. So liad is something that is important, and them are realizing, well, I have to go get a job where I can make money to then provide. And so that's what Autumn did, and they um yeah, and then also too, um we're looking at that. So you have that happening, but then also too, before that happened, before the total depletion of the water, there's also allotment that happened. And so, real quick, before I get into talking about allotment, if you never seen how the Santa Cruz River flows, this is a picture of it. So it actually starts in Arizona, then it heads south, does a U-turn, and then comes back up into Arizona. And you can see where it travels to. And so that was something, within my research, was that even having a map like this and having basic facts, because there were things I didn't know. And, not only, like I said, am I learning important information about my community, my family, but I'm also a future allottee. And so growing up, I would ask questions, and, things are still confusing to me because I didn't know the history. And so I'm like, if I'm like this, I know there's others that are in the same position as me, wondering like, well, I don't really understand, why this issue is so important, right? And so again, hopeful that my paper is able to give people the full history, and so then they can be like, okay, I get it now. And so this is that same picture I showed before, but having this next to this map, so you can see it, and it's really interesting of how it where it starts, in the San Rafael Valley, and goes into Mexico, turns and comes back up. And so, but as we talk about getting into allotment, and so that was like one issue, right? Is the loss of water. And but then also too, so we start to see the depletion of water, like I said, in the late 1800s into 1900s, when it really was put on our radar. But then also too, around that time is when allotment happened. So within American Indian history, there's these different eras that took place, and in eras, in terms of there's a boarding school era, removal era, allotment era, reorganization era. And so allotment era was between 1887 and 1934. And so it was, like so many of these eras, they were meant to assimilate us as Native and Indigenous people into Western culture. And so the point of the lot of allotment, or General Allotment Act, Dawes Act, when it was created in 1887, was to civilize us and assimilate us into how we should be living. And so that meant we would be farmers, ranchers, or harvesters of timber. And based on your family size, determined how many acres you got. And so that, for us in Santa Xavier, was interesting, because what had we been doing for time immemorial? We were farmers. So, through different conversations that I've had and really awesome discussions with different O'odham scholars and elders, you know, um, I kind of proposed. I said, well, why do you think, 3 years after the General Allotment Act was passed, did we in Santa Xavier go through allotment? Was it really because we were the only um, part of the reservation that was established for the Tohono O'odham Nation, or was there more to it? And so, again, that's where I said I got into these really good and interesting discussions because at this time, Santa Fe Indian Reservation was established already. That was 1874. And then prior to that, I know I'm backtracking a little bit. You know, we have Father Kino who came, and we have the Santa Fe del Bach mission that was built. And then again, we have encroachment from outsiders, moving and living around us. A lot is happening during this time. And so, from those conversations and agreements that we were just like, yeah, you know what, I'm on the same page. I agree with you. I see what you're saying. Is that uh, I believe that the government saw us in Santa Fe as a real easy um, trip to make and to assign allotted land. And it was because in other areas of the United States, not only did the government and the Indian agents have to come in and assign plots of land, again, based on your family size, which varied from 40 to 160 acres, but they also had to teach the native indigenous peoples a new way of life. But for us, you weren't going to have to teach us a new way of life. And so that is, in my opinion, why 3 years after the Dawes Act was passed in 1890, that we went through allotment. Yes, again, like I said, there was Santa Fe Indian Reservation established, but really it was just, we just have to, we meaning the government, have to come and establish just the parcels, and they're good to go. And so there were 292 allotments that were given out, which totaled 41,000 acres. And um, like I mentioned, I had family members that were there. And also, to another fun fact, or I guess it could also be looked at as misinformation, is that people think that you have to be from Santa Xavier to be an allottee, and that's not true. So originally, with those 292 allotments, not all of them were originally from Santa Xavier. So there's stories that have been shared with me where, um, there was a family that was visiting in Santa Xavier, and somebody told them to, stick around for a few days because they were going to be handing out parcels of land. So they did, and they had, proof that they were O'odham and they were given land. And so that's for original, but you also have to think about later on and even nowadays, and how the lottees and landowners work in terms of, um, who it gets passed on to, and how that gets fractionated. And so, maybe you're from Santa Fe, but your partner isn't. And so again, next of kin, and how things work when somebody passes away and it gets passed to the next, right? And so, and then again, if you originally have people that weren't from Santa Fe and they became allottees or landowners, you know and not everybody who lives in Santa Fe today is an allottee. So it's complicated, to me it's really interesting to kind of break all this down, and to just kind of sit there and be like, huh, okay. But today, so originally, like I said, 292, allotments that were given out, and currently I'm pretty sure my numbers may be a little bit off, but there at least is 1,800 allottees, landowners that have interest in the 41,000 acres. And so and then also too, the fact that, say you were given 160 acres and then you had 5 kids, so that 160 acres then it becomes fractionated because it gets divided to your 5 kids, unless everybody agrees to give it all to one person to manage, which can happen. But again, just thinking about it as if everybody has a fair share. So you're an allottee, you have 5 kids, and then all of your kids have 5 kids, and then you see how this gets, like I said, fractionated. And so even though you can be an allottee, there may be a really small fraction of ownership in your family's parcel. Or maybe you didn't have family that had a lot of kids. My family is actually pretty small, and so then those parcels are bigger for you when they get passed on to you. And so again, just kind of things to think about and how this all came together. So to just do a bit of a recap as we're moving along here, you have Father Kino that comes and builds the Santa Cruz River mission. We adopt and the Catholicism in different ways, and we intermix that with our Himathug, our way of life. Then we start to see, the depletion of water, and then we have allotment come in. And when I asked folks about allotment and when the parcels were divided, I said, then what happened after? And then people said, nothing. People, and I said, what do you mean? And they said, it was, yeah, there was, parcels and people were landowners, but really to us, that was just still a really foreign concept. And it didn't really affect us because then we just continued on farming as long as we could until the water was depleted. And so then when the water was depleted, there were allottees that did lease their land to non-O'odham farmers. And they brought in water from, wherever, or maybe they had a well that they could still tap into, and they utilized the farmland in San Xavier. But the downfall of that was that with these farmers, they used chemicals and they damaged our land. And that didn't come to light and wasn't apparent until the creation of the co-op farm. And so before I get into talking a little bit about the co-op farm, and so you can see again how these are all connected as we're moving along. And so all of these numbers you see are the allotments, and then what you see in green is tribal land. So essentially, the Santa Xavier district boundaries is almost divided in half, with it being allottees, so landowners, and then the other half is district and tribal land. And so really interesting to kind of see this like aerial view of it. And you can see I-19 right here, and then you also see Mission Road coming through. And so really cool historic photo to look at. And there was actually a photo similar to this that I found at the Arizona Historical Society, and folks had asked me about. Like, hey, where'd you get that photo? And they'd never seen it before. And so it was really cool to share these photos with my community back at the end of July when I had an event. And then also too, there was another photo I had asked staff about at the Historical Society, and they couldn't place a year or anything on it. So then I went and I showed it to my mom, and my mom was able to place a date. And then she started telling me all the people who lived in the houses at that time. And so that's another project that I'm going to work on with her, and collecting um, all the names, and just talking to her about how things used to be in San Xavier. And so, from the water being completely depleted, and then the pesticides and other chemicals being used, the community, especially the elders, said we need to do something. And our land is being hurt. Our knowledge isn't being able to be passed on. Our livelihood was taken away. We can't farm like we used to. Like, we need to do something. And so they got together. And if you're familiar, Santa Xavier, where our rock house is, our meeting place, that's where they got together and started to have these meetings. And everybody was in agreement that, yes, something needs to be done. And what do we do? And so they started, you know, hatching a plan and figuring out, okay, what will be successful, what do we want, and who's willing to step up to have this happen. And so that is how the Santa Vera Cooperative Farm became to be. And so part of it was having Latte members agree to have their land be pieced together to create the co-op farm so we can start farming again. And so in 1971, that's when it was created. And so, and that way again, it was a community effort, people coming together. And so Clifford Pablo, he was assigned to go and ask, I believe it was 42 in allottees, for their permission. And he had to go and find them in Santa Xavier and track them down, and be able to get a yes or no and move forward. And then where others agreed to help form, the cooperative farm board and to be part of that. So, really awesome to talk to folks that remember when this was happening and finding old articles. And then also too, it's unfortunate, but Clifford is one of the last living people from Santa Xavier that helped create the co-op farm. And so I had a chance to talk and interview him. And here's a picture of him. Oh, I'm sorry, it was 46 allotments. And that's the original document from the late 1960s, early 1970s that he used. And I remember he pulled it out when I was interviewing him, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, this is awesome. And I was able to make copies of it and even saw my own family members' names on there, which was really cool to see. And so, through Clifford's efforts, and he grew up farming, and spending time with his grandparents and them sharing their knowledge with him. And so he's the one that realized that the land needed to be healed, and it took quite some time. It wasn't like we had a co-op farm, and there was a board. It didn't happen overnight. It was a process to revitalize and, like I said, to heal the land. And there was a lot of work that needed to be done in different areas to make it what it is today. And if you ever drive by or even just Google pictures of it, how green it looks, it didn't look like that at one point in time. And in this picture of my grandma, that's what it looked like, the farm behind her. And she's actually eating wild sugar cane. And so, again, just to kind of put that into perspective, but it's because of what was instilled in us, and making sure that we do right by our community and what we believe in, and our himathug to, do the right thing. And so these are a couple pictures of what is grown and collected today at the co-op. And so we have all that happening, right? And from that, we as a community say, okay, we have established our co-op farm, and now though we should really hold those accountable for depleting our water source. And so in 1975 there was a, a lawsuit that was filed um, through the Tohono O'odham Nation on behalf of the San Xavier district and allottees against agricultural business owners, copper mines, and the city of Tucson. And it was a long process. My whole chapter 5 of my dissertation dives into this. And it was just a really interesting time to be alive and in Santa Cruz with all of this going on, you know? And at times I when I was interviewing, I was just like, wow, you know, because a lot of historical events happened and took place. And again, these weren't resolved overnight. You know, it took time and effort and dedication and passion to make sure that SWORSA happened and was passed, and you know, creating allies along the way, having experts you know, that weren't O'odham to come and assist us, and then us going and getting educated so we became experts in this and understanding what was happening. And so 1982 is when everything was settled, and that's how the Central Arizona Project waters came to Tucson, came to Santa Xavier. And the Santa Xavier Co-op farm today, that is their main water source, is the Central Arizona Project, or CAP waters. And so from that, though, followed several different documents that the district uses today. And then also to the creation of the Santa Xavier Latte Association in 1991. And so you know, that is something that's really important to have, because you know, again, we need to protect our water and our land. And so how do we do that in this day and age, right? And so the Latte Association is something that's really great for our landowners. And like I said, they hold different meetings and they talk about these issues, and you know, are there to help in any way they can, especially when you have these different businesses, or you know, outside entities, I guess you call them, that come and say, hey, why don't you lease your land to me, you know, and I can make you a millionaire and this and that. And you know, really looking at that and saying, well, you know, what does the fine print say, right? And so that is something. These are some old newspaper articles. There's my grandma; she kept popping up, and then my grandma Lena, and then this other picture is my grandma Rosanna Carlisle. And so it was nice to see family from time to time that pop up, especially my grandma. I didn't know she was interviewed so much. And so one of the first and biggest outside entity that came to Santa Xavier was this proposed land development by Santa Cruz Properties. So, and this was in the late 1970s. So again, we have allotment that happened. We had the water that was depleted, but then we had the community coming together and saying, we need to fix this. We need to do something. Then we had the creation of the Santa Cruz Co-op farm, realizing that the land was hurt and we needed to revitalize it, fix it. And also too, you know, looking at holding those accountable for what they did. But then also too, all when this is going on, you have Santa Cruz Properties coming in and saying, I can make you a millionaire, and asking allottees to lease their land to them. And it would have been a 90-year lease, and they would have created this massive community south of San Xavier. And you can see in this picture here, so you see the Mission Church and then what it would have looked like. And I can't imagine if this had gone through, standing at the church and looking to the south and seeing this huge golf course, these houses, and all of this was not, it wasn't for O'odham. They were going to use O'odham land and supposedly, make Allottees rich, but it was meant for, non O'odham. And, it was crazy because, again, it's like all these things are going on, and then this, just is adding to the list. And, it was interesting to see how bad Santa Cruz properties, especially the developer Jim Rothschild Jr. and what he was trying to do and kind of go through the not well, he was skirted around the necessary channels and the requirements. Like, he was supposed to go to the lattes, but instead he tried to go around that and go through all of these other um like leadership to get approval. And actually, one of my uncles, Mike Rios, happened to be at a community meeting and had heard that this was approved. And he was like, "What? What do you mean? This is the first I'm hearing of this." And then he went and told my grandma Lena. And then after that, it spread like wildfire throughout the community of people saying, you know, did you hear about this? Did you know about this? And nobody knew. And so, you know, that's when the community was like, hey, what is going on here? What, how is this approved? And, really holding people accountable and saying, I need answers here. And so this would have been a 6-phase development. And again, like I said, if there were allottees that had leased their land, it would have been a 90-year lease, and 16,000 acres of the 18,000 acres of what this would have looked like would have belonged to allottees. And then 2,000 of it would have been tribal land. And people saw dollar signs. People said, oh, you can make me rich. Like, let's do it. And it actually really divided the San Xavier community, where relatives, neighbors weren't talking to each other. And so it, again, I had never really heard of this. And so this would have been this one newspaper article, it says it would have been a city for 100,000 people. And so from this, that's how the Defenders of O'odham Land Rights was created. And this was also a long battle. This isn't something that was resolved in a day or a week. It took years upon years. But these individuals that were part of the defenders, or called themselves a defender, stuck with it to the very end until it was totally rejected, never happening ever. And then before Mike Enos Sr. Passed, that's what he shared, was his time and what it was like. And I'm really glad that I was able to talk and capture that and use um, his words, and so they'll live on forever within my paper and then the video as well. And so um, there was a series of articles that were covered this, and it was just, again, it was, what else is gonna happen? Really, but we're strong, resilient people, and we fought, and we made sure that this didn't happen. And like I said, that divided the community, but we healed. It took time, but we healed. And it's something to look back on. And the stories, that were shared with me too were really great. And and I, again, it's just, I had no idea that this had happened in my community. And so, like I said before, looking at all of this being interwoven, and how, so much of it just led from one thing to another, and creating important associations like the Santa Cruz Latte Association, and then also to um, the general land use plan, vision plan, and community plan in the Santa Cruz community. And sorry, I have a typo there. But again, these were foundational because nothing like this had happened before. But again, it's us and what we're taught, and within our Himathug, and some will say communal, and being a community and coming together. In my research, I use rationality, and looking at the rationality of how we come together, and your relationship, that relationality of you know that you have with your neighbor, with your relatives, with your community, and sticking together and being there to support each other, and in this case fight for our land and water. And so, here's that one picture I was talking about. Coming soon to your backyard, a new city of 100,000 people. And that's actually Mike Enos, uh, and in his younger days. And it was really cool to see some of these pictures too of different people. Like there's my Uncle Mike, and others too. And again, just finding these old newspaper articles that were around. And so one of the things that I noted is that we had all of these different, I guess you could describe them as battles and fights that we took on as a community. And so today we have the blessing of our one of our aquifers that is flowing again in the Santa Cruz River. And so and that's just, to me, like, it just brings warmth to my heart to see this, and be able to go out there. And we have a ceremony that we've been having for the last 4 years to give our thanks to creator to for being able to give this back to us. Because and through my research too, it was always talked about in the past, like this, nobody thought we would see the Santa Cruz running again and having the aquifer flow. So, it's something beautiful. And these are recent photos I took when I was out there. But again, we are truly blessed for this. And I've gone out on tours with students too, and they're like, "So when did you plant all of this vegetation and the trees?" And we haven't. It's just being monitored by Santa Xavier District, and others like myself that go out and just check on things. And people are just like blown away by the fact that with just a little bit of water, what can grow in the desert, right? And so this is, I believe, my last slide. But looking at all of this, and how coming full circle. And it was a real short story that I'll share. Is when I was getting ready to defend for my dissertation, and I had to put a PowerPoint together, I was trying to make everything linear, and I was trying to put this timeline, and wouldn't come together. It just didn't look right. Things were just, it just was not happening for me. And I was frustrated and I was tired. And so I went to bed. I got up super early before my defense, and I started putting this together and really seeing how things have come full circle in different ways, with the farm. For example, Clifford was our first farm manager, and then now the farm manager that is there is somebody who worked under Clifford, because Clifford is our farm manager here at Tohono O'odham Community College, and he runs a farm extension program, and so um, you have others too that are working at the farm that have worked with Clifford that are carrying on his knowledge, and even also too some of his family seeds that he um, utilized when he first started at the farm are still being used at the farm. So again, that's like one way you see things come full circle. Another is with our water source being completely depleted, but then now we have that aquifers flowing again. And so then when this came together, I was just like, this makes sense. And then even also too looking at our man in the maze, our journey in life, and how that is, some describe it as a maze or a labyrinth, and it's just circular. And so again, highlighting to some of the pictures I shared, and just what has transpired over time in San Xavier when it comes to our land and water. And now I'll take questions if anybody has any questions. And this is actually the logo that the defenders of O'odham land rights utilized. And they asked Leonard Chanabut, an O'odham artist, to create this. And from what was shared with me, it's representing O'odham fighting and protecting our land and upholding our Himathug. And as I mentioned, throughout the presentation. And so, again, really cool to have this shared and be able to share it with you all today. Thank you. So,
Thank you so much for sharing.
yeah, of course. So, is there questions in the chat, or how, or
Let's see. There were some comments, no questions just yet, but let me go back and double check. So please, any questions? So I started jotting down like some comments and questions like this was going through it. One, just as like an educator, an O'odham educator, I so much appreciate the work, your dissertation work just on the Santa Xavier district. I feel like so much that when you looking for like materials and so much that's written, I think a lot of times Santa Xavier gets left out of like the written what is written on the Tohono O'odham Nation, and and I feel like what you put together is like a part of a missing piece of the puzzle. In a sense, and then that kind of goes back to a conversation I'm always reminding folks that how diverse we are as Tohono O'odham among ourselves, you know. And we were having a conversation earlier. Some of the staff members at Himdaki were able to meet with staff members at the Desert Museum earlier today. And so we were having like kind of like sharing this conversation about how diverse the population is. And then there's the districts, and there, I think someone made a comment. It's like, oh, so it must be different from district to district. And I was like, well, yes, but at the same time, those aren't traditional boundaries. That's like way after the fact. I was like, so it kind of breaks down even more to like communities and then even families, and I was like, so there's no one way. And I loved, and I've never seen this part, that portion of your presentation where you even said like, well, this is the district, but like pre that there were these communities within this area. And I love that. Let's see. We do have a question here. It says, how many was with the defenders? I can't remember if you mentioned that.
so yeah, so I got different numbers from different people, but I think it was at least about maybe 20 that were the real solid group of defenders. But of course, others would come and help out whenever they could. And then one elder I interviewed, he was like, actually, I got involved because one of my brothers, and he was like, hey, you should start coming to these meetings. And so he was like, whenever I could, I would come to the meetings, and then he got involved. And so it, again, it was a community effort that for those that were against it, that came together and would help out. And even stories being shared with me of how they put together pamphlets to hand out to people to tell them why, this isn't a good idea to have, this city of 100,000 and, you're not going to become a millionaire off of it, and really just trying to educate. And then they created shirts with that logo on there too, and so they could raise money and all these different things. And so and I think also to another part to it is the fact that our history in Santa Cruz is very different than any other community district and parcel that makes up the Tohono O'odham Nation. And this is actually probably like the first document, from what I understand, my dissertation paper, writing all of this history together in one. Because prior to my paper, everybody was like, oh yeah, your Auntie Julie's the one I always go to. Or if somebody has a question regarding land and water issues in Santa Cruz, your auntie's the one to go to. And so now she's passing her knowledge on to me. And and documents and all this other supporting material for me, so then I can share and I can educate. And I really look at my paper as the start of a lifelong um, journey as an O'odham scholar. This is just the start, I feel like. And I saw one of the questions pop up about the Colorado River. And yes, that is something that is on the Santa Cruz Latte Association's radar, and sharing with the Lattes, looking at climate change. What does that even, entail for us? And so there's so much more to explore. And so this is just laying the foundation, and then now being able to kind of jump from these different chapters into how is this affecting things today? What are we going to do? And what's the plan? And there is some things that the district is starting to implement, or have gained a grant, to start talking to our youth and planning. And I think that's one of the things too for my paper, is just wanting to have the youth have a resource too, and so they can truly understand why this is important, and so they can plan, because they are our future. They are going to be making these decisions down the road about climate change and um, water and land issues. And so they need to know. And I wish I had something like this when I was younger, so when those times I was confused, I'm like, I don't get it. I would have something to look at. But now we do. And so and then again also too, there was another individual that during my research that I was able to interview that passed away, and that was Adam Andrews. And so his words are able to live on. And then also there were others though too that I just didn't get a chance to talk to, which was really hard. But again, I can't stress enough how important it is for you to talk to your family, your community, and ask those questions. Don't be shy, and because you don't know, tomorrow's not promised. And I saw that throughout my research. And I've seen it in other ways too, and it's really hard. But again, those two individuals, their voices are able to live on through this paper and the recordings that I have. And again, I encourage you all to read my paper, listen to those audios, recordings, and happy to share that with you. And you can email me and I'll send those to you. So any other questions in the chat?
Yeah, it says, when the allotments were rented out, did the owner still stay on them?
Say that again?
When the allotments were rented out, did the owner still stay on them?
So, okay, so I think you're talking about when they were originally, when the co-op farm was created, then the 46 individuals that agreed to lease the land to create the farm or get farming going again, no. And so those allotments today, it's just used for farming, where there are some people that do live within the farm fields. That's their own allotted land that isn't given to the co-op to utilize, if that makes sense. But after, with allotment, when allotment happened, in 1890, yeah, people just continued to live in their areas, and they had their own little oitak, their own little farm, and so did their relatives and neighbors. So not much changed. So that was, something that, again, that's where people were just kind of like, we just went on living our life like we did, but it wasn't till later then things changed. And also too, for quite some time, um, those allottees were leasing their land, but they weren't being compensated. And so now the allottees that do lease their land to the co-op farm do receive compensation for the farm using their land. And so, but again, that's something in more recent years that was finally approved, but took a long time to, do that, because they have to have the Bureau of Indian Affairs included in that. And there's a lot of different steps. So,
I'm not seeing too many other questions in the chat here, but one thing I just want to mention. So I also, my background is in American Indian Studies, and so we learn about all the different eras, and like the allotment era was, a big one. Obviously, Santa Cruz District, the North Nation is never mentioned in that conversation when it's discussed, and like and what we learn in that discipline of the allotment areas is the quick fracturing of like all of it to where it depletes it so quickly. And I know that's a struggle for a lot of communities have had, that still, still struggling with. And I think it's amazing that, with the Santa Cruz District, that you we were able to stay in intact to an extent, to a sense, um,
yeah. And I think also too, it's interesting that in other areas that went through allotment, that like Oklahoma, they're checkerboarded, right? Because they sold their allotments. For Santa
the
Xavier,
pressure.
yeah, but in Santa Xavier, there was never conversation. That was never an option to sell, and there, well, I mean, there's one point in time they leased it to those non-Optum farmers, but that was never like, when it really came down to it, that's something we never wanted to do. And, it's to, again, keep the land and take care of it. And so, one of my dissertation chair, yeah, it was my dissertation chair. He was the one that brought that up, and I was like, you know what? I was like, I never really thought about that, but it was never part of any sort of conversation. It's, we're defending this, we're gonna fight, and continue fighting this to keep what is ours, and that's, I think, really speaks to us as a community and as a nation.
And then I also think, and I just think back to the conversation we had last week with Ali, and it reminded me of a conversation that I had actually with Dwayne Pierce in his class, um, it, that the Tohono O'odham Nation, because of where we're situated, in a lot of ways we're fortunate because we never were removed or forcibly, just because of our location, it wasn't considered desirable for a lot of non-Autumn, but it's obviously
Mhm.
desirable for us. And so, and I wonder if that has anything to do with, the early on of when allotment happened, that there wasn't like immediate pressure to start selling, whereas opposed to like the those in Oklahoma, there was like immediate pressure. It's like, sell this, we'll give you that, and and it comes out of nowhere. And it just makes me think about, yes, we are fortunate in a lot of ways, even though we've suffered in others. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I had many great conversations with folks about this, and what are your thoughts? With a lot of our elders, and just picking their brain to get a better understanding and dive into some of the, what we're talking about now, what you're bringing up with American Indian history eras, and you know, um, and looking at how some did and didn't affect us, and also too, I think, just bottom line, yes, we were assimilated in some ways, in my opinion, but mostly we you have to be smart to live in the desert. So when times change, we were smart enough to realize we needed to adapt to survive. And and then that's right. And like I mentioned within my research in my presentation tonight, where it's like, if we didn't know how to tackle something, we found someone who did, And so we had lawyers that came, that we sought out, others that came to us that wanted to help us. And then even there were defenders and others that said, I want to take classes. I want to be better, prepared for what's ahead. And, they were going to Pima Community College or doing trainings or whatnot to better themselves so they could serve the community. And so that was really awesome to see too. And, all these different efforts. And then I didn't even get into the other part of it where there were the defenders that strategized to get individuals in office for the district, and also our district council, to help make sure that things are handled correctly and making sure that folks understand what was going on at that time, and it not be so one-sided. And so that was interesting to hear how that was all strategized. And and some things were just as simple as, I got asked, and here I am 30 years later, and it's just like, wow. But again, really great conversations to be had. And I think even more, in terms of looking to our future, that I really want to explore and talk with others, when it comes to those really important issues that we see when it comes, like I said, to climate change and other environmental issues. And I hope to collaborate with others too on projects and papers and discussions and so on and so forth.
Well, thank you. And the last question here is for Himdaki, and I'll just answer that really quick. And they're just asking if they'll see more virtual lectures. And so I will say my intention is to periodically still offer virtual lectures. We're working on technology upgrades to extent to where we could potentially offer hybrid things, but we definitely want to have more in-person activities. But I don't want to neglect that we have been able to reach a larger audience online. And I will say the best place to keep up to date on what we have coming up is our Facebook page. We have something in the works planned for September. The details aren't ironed out enough to where I can advertise it just yet, but be on the lookout for it. And we're really excited for it. And thank you all for coming. We'll go ahead and close it. Jacelle, I did put your email in the chat so
Okay,
people
great.
can contact you.
Awesome.
I will be
Yeah.
asking you for a copy of your dissertation. I'm really excited to read it.
Thank
So,
you,
but thank
everybody,
you
for
so much for
coming.
joining us. All right, everybody have a good evening. Thank you.